by the end of this video, you will know about voice in the Greek New Testament and how the middle voice is usually translated. Hi, Rob McIver here. Let's talk about voice and do it in a way that makes it easier for beginners to understand. Now, English has two voices, an active voice and a passive voice. Greek has three, an active, middle, and passive. So that's why we're having a whole video on how do we translate the middle voice. You'll be pleased to know it's okay in the end. All right, so in the table already, I've noted that English does not have a middle voice, but it does have an active and a passive voice. So let's look at the difference in English. And the good news is it's pretty much the same in Greek. I have two sentences here. Peter throws the book, and the book is thrown by Peter. And I was even able to give you a Greek translation of the first sentence, given that you're likely to have most of the vocabulary and the grammar to put it together. In my series of videos, the passive voice comes up much later. I haven't been able to provide an equivalent translation. So these two sentences illustrate nicely the difference between an active and a passive voice. For example, in the sentence, Peter throws the book. The verb is throw, and Peter is the subject of the verb. Now, Peter initiates the action. In the sentence, the book is thrown by Peter. The book is the subject of the verb, and the book receives the action. So in the table that we have here, I've summarized it like this. Well, let's start with the in English column. In English, the subject initiates the action of the verb in the active voice, and in the passive voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. And you'll see that the Greek column is exactly the same. In Greek, in the active voice, the subject initiates the action, and in the passive voice, the subject receives the action. But what about the middle voice? Well, probably the best way to approach this is to take some examples of verbs that occur frequently in the Greek New Testament and see the manner in which they are used. I explain this in much greater detail in my book, Intermediate New Testament Greek Made Easier, and the categories that I'm about to talk about are found in chapter 4 of that book. But I think it might be helpful to share these with you so that you get some conception of how the middle voice works, and then we'll give you a summary at the end and finally talk about how to translate it. All right, well, let's look at some of these more frequently occurring verbs. The verb erchomai, for example, is used a great deal in the New Testament, and it comes with compounds. So we have erchomai, I go or I come. We have ep erchomai, I go away, eis erchomai, I go into or enter, etc. So with erchomai, I've said this is self-involvement because this is something the subject decides to do. It's volitional. Another verb that occurs in the middle voice frequently in the New Testament is parouomai, which also means I go. Hagiomai I've used to illustrate other forms of self-involvement which a middle voice verb might express. Hagiomai, I think, regard, and guide is an example of a verb that's used in the middle voice that expresses an intellectual activity. So here we have some other frequently occurring verbs that use the middle voice. Decomai, I receive and take, is categorized as expressing self-interest. The subject acts in its own self-interest. Fair enough. Apokrinomai, oh, by the way, I need to interrupt myself here. It means I answer, but you'll notice it's found 14 times M in the middle voice and 217 times P in the passive voice. And that's a bit of a guess because, in fact, if you look at the paradigm of the verb found as an appendix in my book, Beginning New Testament Greek Made Easier, and on one side you've got the middle voice and on the other side you've got the passive voice. They're going to be a bit small, but if you squint, you can probably see that for the present and imperfect and the perfect and the pluperfect tenses, the forms are exactly the same for the middle and the passive voice. There is only a different form for the future and the aorist. So for the present tense, it's sometimes problematic to work out whether it is middle voice or passive voice. So, for apocrinomai, there's at least 14 in the middle voice. We can tell because it's used as a aorist or a future. And I have to confess, probably most of this is in the passive voice. So that's why I guess passive. So aspadzomai, I greet, and apaneomai, I disown or I renounce. What's the common feature of these verbs? Well, there are two parties involved, and if you removed one party, the verb would stop making sense. So that's a middle voice used for a verb expressing reciprocity. Enduo is an example of a verb that expresses clothing. And this is something that a subject does to themselves. So that's described as reflexivity. Two more categories. The verbs guomai and theomai, meaning I taste and I see, are verbs of perception. And the term receptivity is used to express that. So the middle voice verbs are used to express perceptions. And finally, there's two verbs here. Ginomai especially is used quite a lot, and kathemai is used enough. Ginomai is used 667 times. It means I become, come to be, happen. We will meet that verb often enough. And kathemai occurs 91 times. It means I sit. You'll notice that every other verb ends with omai, because that's the present indicative ending of the verb. Kathemai is not found in the present indicative in the New Testament. It's found 65 times as a present participle, and most of the rest as imperfect indicatives. That's a form of the past tense. So let's think, what is common to all of these verbs? If I had to sum it up, I would say the subject is involved in the action in some way. So let's look at our chart again. In the active voice, the subject initiates the action. In the passive voice, the subject receives the action. In the middle voice, we can summarize by saying the subject participates in the action. Well, that's a little bit about the middle voice. But how do we translate it? Well, English does not have a middle voice, so we have a choice of translating it with an active voice or a passive voice. And almost always a Greek middle voice verb in the New Testament is translated with an English active voice. And while we're on the subject of translation and voice, there are several verbs where the English idiom, I think, is slightly different to the Greek idiom. Take, for example, boulamai, memneskomai, and phobiamai. Well, they mean I want, memneskomai, I remember, and phobiamai, I fear. Now, they are always found in the passive voice, but we translate them almost always with an English active voice. So I guess there's the idea. In the Greek mind, I fear is something that happens to you, so the subject are passive when that happens. In the English voice, fear is something that we have a little more control over. Who knows? I don't know whether that's the point or not, but it's just a different idiom. All that aside, the news is good, isn't it? When you meet an omai verb in the vocabulary, this indicates that the verb does not have active voice forms. Most frequently, these are found in the middle voice. Although chapter 4 of my book, Intermediate New Testament Greek Made Easier, lists some other varieties of the way voice and translation interacts and the various idioms between the English and the Greek. But for us, especially us as beginners, when we meet an omai verb in a vocabulary, it indicates the verb is usually found in the middle voice, and we almost always translate them with an English active voice. So that's good news. If you are meeting middle voice Greek verbs for the first time and want to practice translating them, you may find the exercise in chapter 11 of my book, Beginning New Testament Greek Made Easier, to be very helpful. This video is a part of a series of videos on various aspects of the Greek of the New Testament. You can most easily find these videos by subscribing to my YouTube channel, NT Greek Made Easier, or by following me on x.com at robmciver2024. And hey, if you found this video helpful, why not let me know by clicking on the like button below or by clicking on the heart icon. Thank you.